Hello and welcome to GeoBuiz, your daily roundup of news from geospatial industry. I'm your host Bhanu Rekha. For the next 15 minutes, I will bring you the news from the top developments across projects, products, policies and businesses. The USGIF announced the recipients of its 2015 awards program at the recently concluded Geo in 2015 symposium. The awards honor geospatial intelligence tradecraft's brightest minds. Air Chief Marshal Sir Stuart Peach, Vice Chief of the Defence Staff for the UK Royal Air Force, was honoured with the Arthur C. Lundall Thomas C. Finney Lifetime Achievement Award. The Military Achievement Award was conferred on Air Force Director for Intelligence, Surveillance and Reconnaissance Interoperability Series Team. The Government Achievement Award was given away to U.S. Army Geospatial Center. The Industry Achievement Award was bestowed upon George Guy Thomas of C Sigma. Thomas is also known as the father of space-based automated identification systems. George Stanley Bosage of the University of South Alabama bagged the Academic Research Award. Ohio State University's Professor Dorota Gresner-Brzezinska and Dr. Charles Toth received the Academic Achievement Award. The Outstanding Administrative Support Award was conferred on Donna Pillay of National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. In addition to this, the Lieutenant Michael P. Murphy Award in Geospatial Intelligence was presented to Jeffrey D. Crasy, who is an air interdiction agent for the U.S. Department of Homeland Security's Customs and Border Protection. Insurance Australia Group IAG has launched a disaster risk management tool called the Global Risk Map. For the first time, insurance data has been combined with other key global natural disaster statistics. The map highlights the social and economic devastation caused by cyclones, floods and earthquakes over the past 115 years. The interactive map also highlights the areas of greatest vulnerability to natural hazards and overlays data with relevant insurance information. The online tool is expected to help governments, businesses, NGOs and local communities to visualize the full impact of previous global disasters and identify areas of high vulnerability. Spatial data provider Earth-Define has created a 1-meter resolution tree-covered dataset for California. It uses the newest 2014 National Agriculture Imagery Program aerial imagery. The tree map can help planners assess urban tree canopy for any city in the state. It can also support other applications like biomass estimation, wildfire risk monitoring and improved modeling of stormwater flows. Earth-Define has used Geographic Object-Based Image Analysis platform for data crunching. The platform has the capacity to integrate multiple data sources, including the base 4 band color infrared imagery, demographic data, cadastral and transportation vectors. Moving on, Switzerland's Federal Office of Topography, SwissTopo, is developing hydrogeological maps for the Central African Republic chart. The maps will help chart to better manage its water resources. In the first stage, 9 maps at the scale of 1:500,000 and 15 maps at the scale of 1:200,000 are being created. Different rock formations in chart are also being cartographically registered with respect to their water permeability. Experts in both Switzerland and chart are pleased with the multiple possibilities of this new hydrogeological map. For the first time in 50 years, the actual topography of this Central African country is shown on a map, which also makes this map a national topographic map. Also from the world of mapping, a University of Sydney student has used smart mapping technology to analyze data and examine graffiti hotspots in the Australian city. The data was sourced from both the City of Sydney and his own field research. Surprisingly, The results challenge the effectiveness of the most popular anti-graffiti measures. The findings concluded that zero tolerance and rapid removal graffiti policies may actually increase vandalism or merely shift the problem elsewhere. It should be noted that Australia spends around $200 million annually removing graffiti. The research is significant to councils, law enforcement agencies, and community groups directly involved in the cleanup. Reports are coming in that TomTom and Looksoft Holding has entered into a partnership. TomTom's navigation engine NavKit will now be integrated with Looksoft's car infotainment reference design platform AllView. Michael Baiko, Managing Director of Looksoft Automotive, believes that this integration will enable faster delivery of full navigation solutions and development of advanced human-machine interfaces for the company's partners. Israel's crowdsourced mapping tool MapMe has raised $1 million in seed funding led by angel investors Gigi Levy and Daniel Riccanati. MapMe allows businesses to create maps based on particular interests or topics and then share it with their customers. The platform's beta is in more than 30 countries and covers around 90 ecosystems. MapMe says that the funds will be used for global expansion and product development. We are now going to slip into a short break, but when we return, we will take a look at the regional news. Welcome back. The Dutch Land Registry and Mapping Agency Cadastre has switched to PostGRE SQL for 4 of its major business solutions. The PostGRE SQL Relational Database Management System is used by the National Portal for Spatial Planning, providing country-wide zoning information and construction plans. The system drives repository of geodata sets that can be accessed by Digital Geographic Information System. Moving to open source has made the land registry's approach for software development and deployment much more flexible. Ahmedabad Airport in India will soon become the first in the country to get the ground-based augmentation system. This high-accuracy system will help airplanes to avoid tall buildings in nearby areas. It is being powered by home-ground GPS and geo-augmented navigation system Gagan. The accuracy of the system is almost 1.5 meters. Gagan will help to improve efficiency and significant cost savings due to withdrawal of ground aids and reduced workload of flight crew and air traffic controllers. Augmented reality solutions provider Wikitude has announced that it will add 3D recognition and tracking capabilities to its SDK package in September. Austria-based Wikitude's technology recognizes maps and understands rooms. For instance, it would allow one to place digital furniture into a room or let you navigate through an unknown building. Beyond the consumption of digital content in the real world, Wikitude's 3D tracking will allow users to create their own digitally augmented spaces. From Canada, we are learning that intelligent wireless solutions provider Sierra Wireless has introduced the next generation AirPram WP series of smart wireless modules. The embedded module offers integrated device-to-cloud architecture for the Internet of Things. It comes with an integrated processor and a GNSS receiver, reducing the number of components, integration time, and cost for developers. It also has an ultra-low power mode for applications that need to prioritize power management over constant connectivity. On the education front, Riverside Research and the Air Force Institute of Technology have published a textbook on advanced remote sensing. Called The Phenomenology of Intelligence-Focused Remote Sensing, the textbook addresses technical subjects like phenomenology, sensors, and intelligence applications under one cover. The unclassified textbook provides a never-before-seen breadth and depth of specialized information relevant to geospatial intelligence disciplines. It is expected to benefit faculty, students, and personnel across the spectrum of academia, government, and industry. That's all we have for you in GeoBuiz today. Find us on www.geobiz.com and follow GeoBuiz on Twitter. We'll see you soon shortly on GeoBuiz Exclusive.
Once again, Trimble is leading the way in positioning technology with the new Trimble R8S GNSS receiver. An entirely new way to look at receiver possibilities. Simply choose the configuration and features you require today. Then, add features as you need them tomorrow. It's the ultimate in scalability. With this innovative receiver, you tailor your system to your job, to the way you work. Choose the level of configuration that suits your needs. As your requirements change, the Trimble R8S can adapt. You simply add functionality whenever you want it. Each Trimble R8S comes standard with integrated Maxwell 6 chips, Trimble 360 tracking technology, and more. All to keep you productive and expand the reach of your GNSS system. Plus, it offers our exclusive web UI for remote monitoring and the new Trimble DL Android app for GNSS data logging. And the Trimble R8S maximizes productivity by easily integrating with the Trimble S-Series total stations and our innovative V10 imaging rover. For ultimate field efficiency, combine the Trimble R8S receiver with a Trimble controller and the intuitive Trimble Access Field software. Trust Trimble Business Center to help you edit, process, and adjust your data. It's the kind of solution you have come to expect from Trimble. We've been setting the standard in positioning technology for more than 30 years. See how we're raising the bar again with the Trimble R8S GNSS receiver.
Can you tell us a little bit about Geo and what it is that you do in the organization?
We have a lot of obviously formidable competitors in the mapping space.
But saying human geo, I was like perplexed. Why the name human to the geospatial angle?
If we think about land, I mean, land is a key core to prosperity.
Thank you, Hugo, for speaking with GeoBuiz and Geospatial World. Thank you, Hugo, for speaking with GeoBuiz and Geospatial World. Inspire is great inspiration for everybody in the world. It has been a classic example of a success story where the successes in the domain of spatial data infrastructure are far and few across the world. So I would like to ask you, it's now that 6 years into the initiation of Inspire initiative, and I see that European Commission has initiated, you've gone for a public consultation last year, and how has been the outcome of the assessment?
The public consultation was extremely interesting because it allowed us to capture the sentiments of the users of the infrastructure, but also of the producers of the data, those that were delivering the services. And we wanted to check out, like the temperature of the water, how far they stood in implementing this interoperability framework which is called Inspire. And when I say interoperability, I don't only mean technical interoperability. In the strict meaning of the word, it's things that work together. Yeah. And the first thing that need to work together are the people. And that are the people that are drafting the laws. Inspire is a European Union law. It's called a directive. That means that the countries of the European Union and their stakeholders, they have decided on giving a certain direction to build up this infrastructure. And the first thing they agreed to do is to better coordinate their actions. Before, we had a very fragmented situation with a lot of organizations who are each holding a piece of this spatial data jigsaw. The meteo offices, the mapping agencies, the soil agencies, the environmental agencies, the departments on infrastructure. They were all serving their own clients and at times trying to use each other's data, sometimes charging each other for the use of the data, sometimes not allowing each other to use the data. So the first thing they had to do, according to this directive, set up a coordination between them and then redraft their laws and their licenses and their arrangements so that they would take away all the practical obstacles, procedural obstacles as we call them, at the point of use, so that the organization that needs the data at a certain moment can use it without any further hassle. Where do we stand on that? Europe is a complex place. In some countries, they have set up an umbrella organization across ministries, across departments to coordinate that. In others, they have taken the decision to give it to a mapping agency or another organization. And what we see now, that those that were most successful in advancing were those that set up this kind of an umbrella organization where each of the ministries in charge of the organizations that holds a piece of the puzzle, right, gets a sense of ownership, that this infrastructure is also there for them. So that was very important. Some have been more successful than others. The next thing that they had to start doing is redrafting their laws and their arrangements. And in some countries we have seen Inspire licenses being created. We have seen in other countries that after 7 years they still haven't managed to come to an agreement. In other countries they have really enshrined it into the legislation, the obligation to share. So that's the result of a directive which gives various options to implement it so that the objectives in the end are being reached. Our public consultation has taught us that some has been more successful in removing these barriers than in others.
Fantastic.
So it's a checkpoint. We now need to take it a step further. And of course there is the issue, and that's a very important one, of identifying the right data sets, the right pieces of the puzzle. Because if you're working like we do in trying to mitigate effects of climate change, other societal pressures from the driving forces, which are economic development, land uptake, and so on, that all generate a pressure on the environment, which then alters the state of the environment. As a net result, we try to measure the impacts, the risks of flooding, the risk of our natural resources being depleted, biodiversity becoming poorer and poorer. That's this kind of impacts. And then you need to formulate your response to influence the driving forces. They need to identify the data sets, economic data. They need to look at emissions into the environment from industrial facilities. Then they need to measure the state of the environment. Then they need to assess and produce these kind of risk maps or overview, spatial overview, where people, our natural resources, all our assets are at risk. And some have been comprehensive, more comprehensive than others. Some countries, they have said, oh, we focus on this data set, we take this, we take that. What we see now is that the puzzle is not complete. In order to be successful in this management of all these risks which threaten our society, you need to be sure that you have all the pieces of the puzzle. So we are partially satisfied. There's progress, there's coordination, but we are not there yet. The other thing that people have said, and this is very important, 98% of all those that responded said Inspire is still extremely relevant for the issues that it was set up to address. On the objectives, that you need to share data, that you need to document your data, that you need to publish it on the web, that you need to be able to look at this documentation, to know what your data set is about, that you can view it, that you can download through a service. You say, yes, these priority objectives, operational objectives, they are still highly, highly relevant. On the actions, the concrete actions which were implemented, say we are not satisfied. We are partially satisfied. We can now find more documented data. Much more data has entered into the infrastructure, but we still lack these view services for a lot of the data. We still lack these download services for a lot of the data. So it's like we are trying to build a stack and we are somewhere here. All the other blocks on the stack still need to come. And that's what we have learned from the public consultation, what we have learned from the reports from the member states who have been very open in reporting on their progress made. And now we take a moment of reflection to review which aspects of that piece of legislation would need to be changed to address the issues identified. We need to reflect for a moment on what other measures, not legal, we need to develop further. How we can build up more effective public-private partnerships to help us build the technical components, but also to bring in data. We need to reflect on how to better sell the infrastructure through very concrete applications and use cases which have shown that by using this geospatial data, the technologies, so on, we really provide a tremendous economic added value, that we contribute to innovation, that there is growth, economic growth, but also that we are increasing the skills of the people and hopefully also creating jobs. We have learned in this conference about the tremendous amounts of money that all this together, geospatial technologies combined with good legislation, could generate for our society. But unless we tackle all these demons, which we are fighting everywhere, sometimes they are stronger in this region, weaker in that region, we need to fight them all. Otherwise, we are not going to reap these billions of dollars or euros or whatever that all these beautiful economic studies are telling about.
I also understand that different countries in the which are part of Inspire directive are at different stages of implementation. Some are quite in an advanced stage, and some are still in the process of setting up things. So, is there any initiative in terms of bringing them on par with each other, or let the pace go at its own?
We are not allowed to let it go on as it goes on. We have arrived at a stage where we have to draw a new baseline.
Okay.
Inspire is not an option, it's a piece of law.
Yes.
And already the European Commission started with what we call pre-infringement procedures on this law with a number of countries who have, let's call it, performed the worst so far. This already has led to 3 countries responding immediately, making their data available through the GeoPort, the EU GeoPort. So we had immediately very positive reactions. I would call it, initially, we give a little nudge, a warning shot in front of the ball. If we would not do that, the public would say, what is the European Commission doing? They are the guardians of the treaties. They are the guardians of the European law. If a country does not respect its own laws, because they have designed Inspire, then somebody has to tell them, and that's our job. Of course, at the same time, we enter into a dialogue with the countries to understand better what are their issues. We should not forget that we are slowly crawling out of a very severe economic crisis in Europe. And it had a profound impact, not only on Inspire, unfortunately also on many other important social aspects of our society in Europe. So yes, we are doing something constructively, warning people, trying to identify where we need to put more resources, and also, what most important, if some countries have been more successful than others, we would like them to work together, share their developments, the software, the tools, but also the lessons learned, so that they can help the neighbor with whom they share so many interests across borders to rise up to the same level.
As I understand, Inspire directive enables the spatial data infrastructure of about 34 data themes. Has there been any consultation in the first round around the themes as well? Has there been any discussion on what is relevant, what is probably more relevant and that need to be added to the existing data themes, something like that?
There was, of course, when the directive itself was designed, there was a very broad public consultation and an involvement of also, for example, European Environment Agency, where we looked at all these different pieces of European law in the environmental area, on water, on air, emissions, environmental impact assessments. And then we looked at what data do we need for managing better our water, our air. And then we came, of course, to meteorological data, to soil data, land use data, land cover, rivers, and a lot of reference data. The hydrographic networks, the transport networks, also the cadasters. Properties are important, especially the attributes of these pieces of land. So all these teams are not there just for a purpose. We put them in this entire risk management cycle, and we looked at what type of data is needed on impacts, on state of environment, on pressures. Has there now been a consultation on this again? It's a permanent process. When we find out that certain data teams are missing, then we will again talk with the member states and say, shouldn't we bring that also under the infrastructure? But so far, we asked that question in the public consultation, and nobody has expressed any particular dissatisfaction. There are some issues with trying to identify where my data set fits exactly into these 34 teams. But this is a minor issue. The most important thing is that it's somewhere in the infrastructure.
Thank you so much, Hugo, for sharing your insight.
Is changing very rapidly. We live in information society, information world, and so as digital world war situations. Role of geospatial technology in combating and preparing one's army and forces to deal with modern warfare challenges is very, very critical. To discuss about increasing role of geospatial technology and at an enterprise level, we have guests with us in this studio today. Allow me to introduce them. On my left is Jeff Harris. Jeff Harris is chairman of the board of USGIF and OGC. He's also on the board of directors of several other companies dealing and associated with national intelligence. He has served as the president of Lockheed Martin and heading the division of missile and special programs for many years. And before than that, he has also been with national intelligence agencies. So he brings together about 35 years of experience and knowledge of dealing with geospatial information and intelligence community. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you.
Then we have Mark Reichardt, which is on the extreme left. Mark Reichardt is the president and chief executive officer of the Geospatial Consortium. Well, Mark Reichardt has been also associated with programs which is dealing with integrated information and product team, which was associated with the national intelligence agencies. And onwards, he also was a part of Al Gore's program or national partnership for reinventing governments using geospatial for improving coordination between federal and local authorities. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And on my right, I have Charles Rowland, who is a senior technical advisor, defense and intelligence at ESRI. Charles has been associated with Defense Intelligence Agency for several years. He joined this agency in 1986, and he has been responsible for transforming all source geospatial analytics to enabling advanced analytics and capabilities for armed forces. So we have three guests who have a different variety of experiences, and they have been associated with the agencies which have been put together, coordinating and working towards preparing the armed forces of the United States in dealing with warfare situation. So let's begin with our discussions with them. Jeff, I would like to begin with you by having your view on what do you think about this changing scope and definition of warfare and the intelligence community at the moment?
Well, the topic today is sort of how do we enable national security around geospatial technologies.
Yep.
And increasingly, national security is made up of economic security and border security and environmental security. And what we find is these technologies underpin everything. So I think over the arc of my career, where it was clear that during the Cold War, we had some principal threats that we needed to understand. Today, the threats have become broader. And so the intelligence community can be supporting humanitarian aid on Monday, and they can be supporting a border situation on Wednesday, and a lot of those same skills come together in order to fulfill sort of the overall national security need.
Very well, actually, what you tried to say that the role of national security agencies is expanding, and it is getting connected with different kind of situations around the world. And this is no more just limited in scope in terms of looking at one set of data sets. You might get a lot of information coming from different sources. So turning back to Charles, what do you think that geospatial enterprise or geospatial technology can help in integrating and providing a kind of seamless analysis of information coming from different sources?
So we've certainly changed a lot in the last 10 years. 10 years ago, the Intel community, it was quite a bit of work for people to integrate their information into their GIS. It might take 50 or 60% of your job time to get everything ready for you to do your analysis. In today's world, there's more and more data. It's open. It's available to you, and as leaders, we're making it ready for them to use and ready for them to do their analysis right from the start. It's opening the door to not only your high-end geospatial users, but your low-end analysts that are just dabbling in the field of GIS. So I think the amount of data is increasing it's increasing just twofold, triple every single day. And the open source community and the social media is driving it, and the data is all free now. We don't have to worry about large scale mapping companies providing our only data to us. We can get it off the internet, and we can get it for free.
Thank you. Mark, you have been associated with various programs dealing with bringing more efficiency and coordination between different sets of geospatial systems. How do you think that OGC has a role to play in enhancing the value of geospatial technology in creating enterprise which can analyze information coming from different sources?
Yeah, well, just to key off of Jeff's and comments and all comments so far, it's all about flexibility and agility to bring together technologies, to bring together different information sources, and not just to bring them together, but to analyze them and process them. And so what OGC does is we work with communities like the defense and intelligence community, law enforcement, environment, and others to get into precisely the types of use cases that they're facing, the challenges that they face in integrating data and technologies. And we build out the standards that allow that interoperability to occur. And I'm happy to say that today we see a multitude of examples of where funding is saved, life cycle systems are put together faster. You can bring data feeds online much more quickly. You can do analytic processes much faster because you can encapsulate a lot of these in standards. And so I think the value to the geospatial enterprise is increasing tremendously as a result of standards. But it's also an area of challenge with the accelerated pace of technology, with the accelerated pace of social media and new data feeds coming online. It presents a challenge to build and create effective standards to meet those needs. So we're busy, but I think the report card so far is good.
So Jeff, looking at the challenges which Mark has just talked about, do you think that a more open and more collaborative platform providing information exchange protocols between various agencies associated with national security can be an opportunity in itself?
When Mark just gave his answer, incorporated into his answer was workflows. And as Charles pointed out, the analyst spends sort of independent of the task, says, I understand the question, let me start to assemble data that might contribute to answering that question. And as we align these data more easily, it allows the analyst to explore and understand how the analysis can be differentiated by new data. So as we approach interoperability, for years we had to work to get the compute available, then we had to get sort of the comms and the storage available. Those technologies have all sort of come together to where at the ability for the analysts to contribute, to collaborate amongst themselves, and to understand how data can differentiate their answer and work with the people that are asking the questions. All of a sudden, we have a framework that is empowered for quickly assessing a situation and coming up with an answer.
Charles, you have been dealing with analytics a lot, and what comes today is that on the one side you look at getting a lot of security sensitive information from intelligence agencies coming from space or earth observation and things like that. But as the warfare tools are changing, a lot of information which is available in the the telecom organization or financial institutions with regard to the human behavior and human patterns, that also is being analyzed. How do you see the decreasing gap between on the one side you talk of security sensitive information, on the other side is the consumer information, consumer behavior information, and how does geospatial plays a role in integrating them?
Well, I mean, the key thing to being able to do good analysis is having everything you need to do your job. And with that, we would need to make sure that everybody shares their data, that they make it available for the whole community as web services, that they avoid the this data is too confusing for you, you're not smart enough to use it. Give them your data, they'll come up with great ideas of how to use it. If it's integrated with classified and unclassified data, they'll come up with really smart ways that you didn't think of with your data, because their expertise comes from another side of the intelligence community. Also avoid some people like to say, that's not my job to serve up this data, I'm actually just a holder of it. Well, if it's spatial in nature, whether you work at a national mapping agency or you work at some other part of the community, it is your job after your data to serve that up in a spatial way using some of the OGC standards so that everybody can share it, integrate it, and analyze against it. And if after that you share your models also, your analytical models, the masses will make your analytical models and your assessments better, because they're going to come in with their perspective. So it's all a matter of sharing through standards and not holding back because you think people aren't smart enough to use your data.
Thanks, Charles. What's emerging is that as far as the technology is concerned, the information sharing environment or the information sharing protocols are not really a serious challenge anymore. You have standards, you have technologies, you have platforms which can enable integration of information. Jeff, this makes me turn to you as a veteran in this industry. That how do you see that several agencies, I saw at least there are more than 12 central agencies dealing with geospatial information in the US Armed Forces. How do you see those silos or those humans who are driving those organizations? Do you find that they will be able to make advantage of this whole technology, or what are the challenges which you see and we have seen in this field?
What's interesting, Sanjay, is as we make the progress that Charles spoke to, the users of the information become more and more demanding. And so those demands come for increased content, and it comes for increased timeliness. And so as we start to run more quickly, the consumers are asking the system to work together in order to solve tougher and tougher problems. What Mark referred to was the demands that we're now putting on the creation of standards. For example, we've been recording information about water for decades, and how much did it rain yesterday, how much did it rain this month. But one of the newest OGC standards is Water ML, and now we're able to do analysis of moving water. And so in the most recent OGC interoperability demonstration, we had first responders dialing back into physics-based models, predicting what manhole covers would be covered with water in San Francisco, as an example, 2 hours from now, which allowed them to change how first responders would move, advise the utilities what it was going to be the impact. So as you advance that cause, people start to recognize what's now in the realm of possibility. This does two things. It puts new requirements back into the standards process. It causes, back to Charles's point, the data has to get better in order to go feed this system. You get a demand function coming from on top. So whether you're a first responder or you're a national intelligence agency, the agencies start to work and say, hey, we now see a Mississippi River flooding. That would be a Corps of Engineers. The Corps of Engineers can make asks of USGS. USGS can go back to either the Defense Intelligence Agency or the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency and understand what some of the best practices are, because NGA, for example, working with FEMA, or USGS working with FEMA, is now starting to take some of this learning. And so what happens now is we see the rising of expertise and the collapsing of vertical stovepipes as processes become increasingly horizontal.
Yeah, you touched upon a point which is on-demand information, or information as a service to the soldiers. And I think recently held a GeoInt conference last week in DC had too much of emphasis on information as a service, and I heard Robert Cardillo, the director of NGA, talking many times about it. So when you're talking of bringing information on demand, how do you see the role of USGIF in promoting that cause, and how do you see the role of GeoInt conference taking further the message of information which can be utilized by soldiers, and that comes from different, just that education and awareness?
The United States Geospatial Intelligence Foundation is a not-for-profit educational foundation, and so growing and expanding the trade craft. So we're able to give scholarships to people in school. We're allowed to work right now with a dozen universities that are focused on geospatial technologies, and we're beginning our professional certification program. So what everybody is doing in each of these categories is sort of upping their game as to how to work with this. And so what we found at the GeoInt 2015 conference is the better part of 6,000 people coming together to take the people, the process, and the technology and allow it to come together in these ever-expanding communities of interest. So what we find exciting is, as Charles and I were discussing off camera, we see the community of interest from DIA working with NGA, but they're also working with companies like Esri, with standards organizations like OGC, under the fabric of USGIF, to understand here's the excitement that we have for how these technologies allow us to solve problems. So what we find at the convening authority of USGIF is to look at all the different organizations coming together that either share a mission or share a technology or perhaps share both, and the ability to reach out to both young people who are learning the skills and mid-career people who are coming through professional certification. And so the nexus of all these things coming in. The government agencies, the businesses, all are dealing with location-based information, and this location-based information is what empowers this industry and gives government, in support of the taxpayers, all these new capabilities.
Thank you. Taking the clue from this, today you have a lot of sensors around us, probably more than we can even ever imagine, and all those sensors are also providing information, as well as those sensors are also tools for delivering information. So what is what OGC does in the field of integrating these sensors and making it much more robust or real-time kind of platform?
Right. Well, that's a great question. Sensors are a part of the living map, living situational awareness, the living analytic, and the integration and aggregation of sensor data, whether they're fixed sensors on the ground, in cities, or aloft or underwater. It's absolutely critical that we're able to interconnect with those sensors and bring that information in and integrate it into our understanding of the environment. And so OGC has a framework of sensor standards that we've developed called Sensor Web Enablement that allows you to integrate this data in a time and location context. actually manage the data historically as well, and make that information available for integration into the situational awareness or planning phase. Moreover, if we talk about smart cities, you talk about national security. It's also about farm to fork. It's also about disease pandemics. National security has a whole bunch of different viewpoints, not just the soldier on the ground, whether they're here or abroad, but to any nation around the world, national security takes on a big issue. So the integration of sensors, tracking shipments, the integration of sensors to manage video surveillance, sensors for building energy efficiency. It's absolutely critical. And one of the areas that we're focusing on quite heavily right now, a couple of areas are called urban resilience. So the example that Jeff talked about, San Francisco flooding, that was a climate change scenario that we used. But in the other context, energy efficiency, energy independence. So making cities efficient is going to rely on this integration of sensors into a city model so we can better understand how to conserve energy and build better structures.
Yeah. So as you said that the sensors are very, very enabling mechanism in the whole process. And that entire process has to be run through the Geospatial platform. ESRI is one of the companies which has been providing the Geospatial platform, which can which can bring information from all the different sources and deliver on different platforms. What do you think is the major challenge which comes into the way of implementing a geospatial enterprise? You have been with the defense agencies as well as now working with the platform company. Right. So what do you see that major challenge?
Well, I joined ESRI 5 months ago after leaving the government after 34 years. So there's lots of challenges. The main challenge is, as we were discussing, is getting all the data ready for the analysts to be able to do their job. The platform has many analytical tools, and those are changing as the data types evolve. As they discuss, time, space, all geolocation, all very critical to making that available to the folks that are doing the analysis. One of the other critical things is to treat geospatial data more like what in the intel community we'd call HUMET, where you talk about the reliability of that source of information, but you don't say it's not any good, and you make everything available, because somebody's data that's not good for a cartographic map production might be exactly what someone needs to be able to do the scenario that Jeff talked about. It may not be accurate enough to do a TLM map, but it might be exactly what you're looking for, how many sewer there are within a particular area, or the name of a particular railroad line in a particular country that wasn't on a TLM map. So the platform needs to make everything available, make it ready for analytical work, and the platform needs to be flexible enough to work in multiple classification domains at the same time. That's really difficult. We're working hard at trying to do that at ESRI. We're working very closely with all of the intel organizations to do that. We're moving our portal technology onto iSight, which is the intel community main cloud for this type of information. And so you'll see a very similar technology, the ArcGIS Online, right on what right now is being called the GeoInt services, or the ICGIS portal, which is going to make things a lot more useful for the intel analysts. The next big step is to be able to have the system integrators or the government folks, or even Esri as a platform provider, to be able to write all those neat little throwaway apps to all of that technology.
Thank you. Well, moving back to a little bit of international arena, when we talk about that the change, like we talked about climate change, we talked about disaster management, we talked about food security and things like that, which means that a lot of international developments do have direct influence on the national security.
Yes.
And in that case, probably the collaboration with the regional and the multinational programs in the field of geospatial technology becomes more critical. And I asked this question to Robert Cardillo as well in the last week in GeoInt. What do you think, Jeff, about facilitating the collaboration with United Nations or Group on Earth Observation Systems or various geospatial programs at the regional and global levels to integrate with NGA programs?
Whenever there's a disaster, a human disaster around the globe, countries try to quickly respond, and the teams that are responding have a demand for a lot of information quickly, and much of that information is location based, and the ability for us to provide data as sort of the first part of the response and allow the first responders and the policymakers to get a clear understanding, whether it's a earthquake in Haiti or earthquake in Nepal or volcano, those kind of responses are awfully important to allow us to quickly ascertain what the problem is and at the policy level agree on what that is. So our ability to quickly move data and allow people to share that common understanding, and then each of the responding agencies best contribute their skills, water purification, tents, medical. It's that integrated response coming in the first couple hours that is really empowered by geospatial technologies.
So moving further towards the policies, you just talked about the policies which can enable and encourage such kind of collaboration. It has been often seen that geospatial technology is normally subjected to a lot of serious policy constraints, be it satellite remote sensing or be it UAVs or be it topographical mapping as well, and this is the case worldwide. And in view of the fact where we are talking of having a integrated geospatial system which brings in the high resolution satellite images on the one side and the lot of human behavior and customer or consumer behavior information on the other side, how do you see the role of openness, or rather how do you see the need of bringing more openness in the field of addressing the policy mechanisms to enable utilization of geospatial technology by the consumer space, which ultimately can help intelligence agencies as well?
We've touched upon it several times during this panel. When the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, spoke at GeoInt 2015, a major theme in his presentation was transparency. And the transparency is, back to the example I just gave, is how does the data help us understand the situation in order to resolve the situation? And so the organizations of the US government working with their counterparts across other government organizations, their ability to share information and ascertain the path forward is awfully important. There's many of us that believe that increasingly having shareable, transparent data allows this shared understanding that provides to a response. That said, each government may bring different data sets to the table, some that can be easily shared and some not as easily. But again, the fabric that's constructed allow for a dialogue to take place that allows us to move forward in mission space.
Thank you very much.
I think you'll see some of the small government folks, or pay attention to the small government folks. They can be the early adopters of that type of stuff. It's hard for the big government agencies to move sometimes through the policy, and some of the smaller organizations can adopt some of this stuff and move a little quicker than the big ones. And if you pay attention to them, you can see how the transparency is starting to happen.
And prototype policy with technology. That way you can improve over time.
I think it's been great discussion on various aspects of geospatial enterprise for national security. But we could very well conclude that geospatial technology is becoming critical and more useful for addressing our security needs and helping our security forces to undertake their job much more efficiently and safely. And the tools are available, and the interoperability standards are making sharing information very easily accessible, and integrating that information through various components of hardware and softwares, and delivering on-demand geospatial information for the soldiers. And what we need is probably much more interaction and greater cooperation, and bringing some kind of openness in our minds to use these technologies and make it happen in much more efficient manner. And the challenge is not the technology, challenge is not the information. The challenge is that how do we open ourselves and become more collaborative platform. With this note, I would like to thank you all for watching GeoBuiz, and thank my panelists for sharing their experience. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff, and thank you, Mark. Thank you very much. You have a good afternoon and good day.